SonicLAB TV.
Hello, welcome to SonicLAB. Today we're looking at the Yamaha O1v96i. This is a compact digital console. It's the third in the O1v range. I think the original O1v, O1v96 and now the i96i. The truth is these things have become incredibly sophisticated. Yamaha have been making these kind of consoles for quite some time. I started out with a ProMix O1, which was last century sometime. So there's a lot of legacy and know-how gone into the making of these things. The sophistication has really increased. The thing about these digital desks is you can patch pretty much anything to anything else. And also this has got built-in VCM effects which add additional processing power and a 16 IO USB audio interface. That's 16 streams out, 16 streams in. Again, also patchable to any channel and configuration. Let's take a look at how the thing's laid out. So here it is. It's actually a 19-inch rack mountable. You can get some ears to put it in a rack. You need something pretty hefty to take it because it's not an inconsiderable chunk of electronics here. To start with, let's look at the analog inputs. We've got 12 mic pre's. These are Yamaha's new mic preamps. They do sound really rather good, so I'm told. We'll check that out later. We've also got line inputs and insert points. All of these are patchable anywhere you want them. There's also 2 stereo inputs for the first 16 channels. USB connector transmits audio and MIDI up to 16 streams of 96 kilohertz 24 bits audio. We've got MIDI in, out and through. SP-Diff 2-track digital send and return. That can be patched to send a number of different audio signals. ADAT in-out, 8 channels of optical as standard. Word clock for syncing up to other word clock enabled devices. Stereo balanced out. The Omni Outputs, these are 4 freely assignable outputs that you can route to buses, auxiliaries, direct outs, all sorts of things, insert points. Monitor output, and you've also got the ability to switch phantom power by blocks of 4. Coming down here, we've also got a spare slot. This takes an expansion for the YGDAI cards. You can have AES, analog, another ADAT port, all sorts of expansion I/O slot options. Finally up here, 2-track on analog phonos and a headphone out with a dedicated level. The faders are all 100mm motorized faders and they're organized in layers 1 to 16, 17 to 32, the master layer which is controlling auxiliary and bus levels, and then a remote layer which enables you to send these values over MIDI. I'm personally a big fan of motorized faders because at a glance you can pretty much see where you are, and if there's any automation going on it's just very clear. That's just the way I like to work. We've also got 4 stereo returns here. These can be taken from any one of the 4 onboard stereo effects generators, or you can patch pretty much whatever way you want. You can switch between them just with this mode button here, and they've got a rotary pot for a level. Each of those 32 channels features a 4-band parametric EQ, a gate, a compressor, an insert point that you can use to patch via any of the 4 VCM effects, or via the outside world, or via the USB sends and returns. You can route each of those channels either via the direct output, 8 subgroups, and there's also 8 auxiliaries. Each of those subgroups and auxiliaries also has EQ and compression and insert points. The 4 stereo effects returns just have EQ and routing. Whichever channel or pair of channels I select is what's currently displayed in these parameters. It also means that the EQ section and the pan applies to that currently selected channel or pair of channels. If I hit an auxiliary, the faders flip to showing the send level for the selected auxiliary send. So now, via the magic of video, a ribbon mic has suddenly appeared, and that's what we're listening to. It's going to sound radically different to what we've just heard, but my video mic has quite a lot of processing on it and a big presence peak. It's being designed for speech. This is a much more sort of open microphone and will sound a bit duller, but I can demonstrate how to tweak that up. If I now go to EQ edit and switch the EQ on, I can see I've got a roll off here and a little presence peak. Perhaps I want to increase that. Maybe I'll up that. We can hear that notch there. And I've got quite a powerful EQ, a couple of different types. And remember, there's one of these on every channel, every bus, every auxiliary. So I'll just drop that down a little bit. I don't quite want as much presence there. Maybe I'll add a little bit more top end. Now I'm starting to sound a little bit more like my video mic, and that's without any dynamics. So now if I go to my dynamics section, I've got a little compressor set up here. drop that in. It's only a few dB, but you can hear it's bringing it all to the front. It's quite subtle, and yeah, I quite like it, but I could, if I want, get much more effective, so I'll just do that now. I'm going to bring the ratio right down, take the threshold right up, bring up the output gain. You're starting to get some more effects kind of compression, which is really sort of slamming. And when you consider that I'm adding 60 dB of gain on the mic amp, because ribbon mics need a lot of gain, and really cranking it, adding another 10 dB and compression here, it's actually not a bad sounding mic amp. It's actually pretty quiet to my ears. Now, where things get really interesting is when you hook it up to a host computer. So I've got the USB cable plugged into my MacBook Pro. I've downloaded the MIDI driver, the audio driver, and Studio Manager and the edit module for the O1v96i. And that's what you can see here. This is the O1v96i editor, and as you can see, you've got a channel listing, selected channel, all sorts of floating windows. You've got effects editors, all of that sort of stuff. Now, what that enables me to do is much more sort of on a global graphically scale, is edit and tweak and see sort of larger, more pretty graphics of what's going on under the hood. Now, of course, I can do it all via this panel, and that's fine. But for someone with eyesight as bad as mine, you know, it's quite nice to be able to do it on the screen. So what I've got here is a basic drum track in Reaper. I've routed all of the individual drum tracks out to USB outputs, which I've got 16 returns. Then I've come into the screen here and I press the patch edit, gone to input patch, and I've selected the first 6 channels to take their returns from the USB. I can just as easily route them into any other channel. I can put them whenever I want. That's one thing I really like about this. You can just patch anything where you want it to be. So in effect, you could do away with a patch bay if you were really smart about it. So here's how the drum kit sounds. Just dry, coming straight in, nothing going on. So I start by selecting my kick channel here, and I go to the software. You can see that I've got the selected channel. Nothing going on there. You probably can't hear very much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the gate on, then the compressor, and my EQ that I've set up. Now that's starting to sound a lot more like a kick. But say for instance I don't like that compressor, I can actually switch on an insert point as well. So let me just show you that. So I switch off the compressor, I've got an insert point here, and what I've done is I've selected the Comp 260, which looks a bit like a DBX kind of compressor. And the way I do this is by the insert point, I can patch from any one of the ADATs, the slot outputs, the USB send and returns, the Omni outs, the 2-track digital, and also the 4 effects. So very powerful routing just going on there, but there is more. If I want to, I can incorporate my DAW into the whole insert and processing chain. I'll show you how I do that right now. Right, so if I go to my stereo pair of inserts, you can see in the channel selected, I've got a bit of compression, a bit of EQ going on. I've also got an insert section here. And what I've done is I've sent and returned on USB 7 and 8 for the stereo pair. Now, if I switch it in, then you can see I've got an armed track here, which is taking the inputs from the 7 and 8 and sending them back out on 7 and 8 as well. So now if I load the effects up, maybe drop in this Apple delay setting, or perhaps I've got as a type alloy, so I'm really going to mash up the overheads to make it sound like this. And yeah, sure, it's going to introduce a bit of delay depending on the power of your system, but maybe for stuff that's not so critical, like, you know, reverbs or something not real time you want to maybe rebounce it. There's an incredibly powerful sort of symbiosis, I suppose, between the two systems. The integration is pretty remarkable. So I'm not going to be able to show you everything this desk has to offer. I mean, it really is just crammed full of features. And that's possibly one of its downfalls as well, because it does so much. You're not just going to get it out of the box having never used a mixing console or digital console before and just be flying through it as if you know, you didn't have to read the manual. You will have to come to terms with the working flow and the terminology and the setup and the synchronization of digital stuff. I mean, there is a lot to learn, but it's worth it because this does an incredible amount. Given the compact nature of this desk, there are going to be some compromises compared to maybe some of the larger and more expensive brethren of the O1v96i. And one of the big ones for me really is the fact that there are no subgroup buttons. So if you select a channel, it's actually quite hard to immediately see where it's routed. But they're going to have to be some compromises. Also, there's a bit of compromise on the routing. I would have liked to have seen the 2-track digital out, you'd be able to route the control room output to that for hooking up to perhaps digital speakers. That would have been great. So how much is it? Well, at £2,600, other currencies will scroll below, it's not an inconsiderable amount of money. But I don't think Yamaha are trying to make something that is cheap. They're trying to get as many professional features into a smaller footprint as possible. And I think they've pretty much done that. You get these great sounding mic preamps, all of the EQ and dynamics for every channel, and don't forget you've got 16 I/O as well as an ADAT port as standard. So this desk sounds good, it's got a ton of features. For the amateur and professional alike, I think the O1v96i definitely is worth looking at if you're looking for a digital console for your setup.